Sound check.
Прием.
Sound check.
Так, дорогие коллеги,
Ladies and gentlemen, the streaming is on,
начать.
so I suggest beginning our meeting.
Гости могут спокойно проходить.
The guests can feel free occupying their seats.
Тема нашего
The topic
совещания
of our today's session
устойчивое
is sustainable development
транспортная инфраструктура.
of transport infrastructure.
Совещание организовано
The meeting is organized by
народных наших коллег
international
международного транспортного
overseas colleagues, One Belt, One Way Transportation Alliance,
дорог и транспорта
China State Construction Engineering Corporation,
и координационного транспортного совещания СНГ,
and the CIS Coordination Committee, represented by Russian delegates.
индивидуальное
Also, we will present our Russian speakers.
объединение
Also, this event is co-organized by Association of Construction Materials Manufacturers and representatives of CIS committees.
Скажу пару слов о
I would briefly outline
структуре
the structure
докладов
of our reports.
к актуальным направлениям
They will be dedicated to the relevant issues of sustainable development, aka ESG agenda.
скажу чуть позже
Later,
его выступления.
I will touch on that
Сейчас
in more details in my speech. Now, I would like to give the floor
в записи
to the person who has recorded their presentation.
представителю более
I'm giving the floor to a higher authority,
консультативного
to the chairperson of the Consulting Committee of the UN for Sustainable Development of Transportation Infrastructure, Vice President of the International Transportation Alliance, One Belt, One Way, Secretary General of the Chinese Community for Roads and
корпоративных членов
Transportation, that covers many
будет.
ideas of Chinese transportation. So venue Lee is provided the floor with.
Напоминаю о возможности использовать
Please make sure you have your simultaneous interpretation set.
перевода. Там есть каналы и
There you will find a channel for English and Russian interpretation.
Скажите, а можно включить все?
Can you please switch on the video?
А можно
Can you please
запустить, да?
start playing?
И
Unfortunately, no sound is provided for the simultaneous interpretation from Russian into English.
各个方面，加强基础设施的建设，对推动社会的进步、民族之间的融合，包括国际间的交流，都有非常重大的意义。近年来，中国基础设施的建设和发展，
The speaker is speaking in Chinese.
我们认为基础设施的可持续发展，未来涉及4个关键领域。第一个是基础设施的智能化，因为智能化的基础设施将有利于推动各种运营方
The speaker is speaking in Chinese.
面的更有效的
извините,
发挥。
перевода пока нет.
第二个方面呢是运输，
I'm sorry, but no interpretation is provided.
大家知道，中国政府也提出了双碳发展的战略目标，未来基础设施的建设，包括载运工具、运输物流，它的低碳化也是我们重点优先发展的一个重要的。
The transportation infrastructure is the top priority development aspect. Also, we need to say that we are creating a unified system and a more efficient servicing system.
Звук пропал.
No sound is provided.
Я все пишу.
I'm recording.
公众对运输和出行的需求，
Мы должны
随着
учитывать все требования.
We need to take into account all the requirements that arise, and we need to conform to these requirements. They are stipulated by the society. We need to take into account how the system
基础设施
is going to develop in the future.
运行这一方面，
Устойчивое.
We need to
俄罗斯以及
conform to the sustainable development strategy of the infrastructure. In these terms, China will be happy to cooperate with other states.
Должны соединять инфраструктуру.
We want to connect the infrastructures and develop unified standards, we need to train qualified
Здесь необходимо
human resources.
и
There is something to be improved in terms of interaction and relations among the countries, and it will facilitate the sustainable development.
совместное продвижение
And cooperative promotion
проектов
of the most efficient and convenient
э,
project
обеспечить
in ESG will allow us
будущее. Мы все
to have a sustainable future. I guess that after the pandemic, we will be able to
общаться
communicate with our Russian colleagues directly, not online, because the face-to-face communication is key to us. We hope for a wide and multifaceted cooperation. And I hope that this cooperation will be sustainable as well.
все страны
All the countries
имеют к этому отношение,
that
много
deal with ESG
также примут
will be active participants of this dialogue as well.
и специалисты.
So, dear experts, specialists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen,
Я очень рад
I'm very glad
принять участие в этом
to take part in this Congress, in this session in Bashkortostan.
Многие организации участвуют
Many organizations participate
в этом мероприятии.
in this event.
Я очень рад при помощи
I'm very happy to join this meeting via our digital technologies. I'm glad to have a chance to
заседания.
address to our Russian colleagues. I want to say that recently we held the SCO meeting.
Председатель,
During this meeting,
президент Путин
the
глубоко
chairperson Xi and the President Putin had a dialogue,
и они договорились
and they agreed
в дальнейшем
to continue their communication and facilitate cooperation between Russia and China
инфраструктуры
and create a common infrastructure, a transportation infrastructure.
и все страны, которые с
All these states related to this aspect noted that the construction of infrastructure
сопредельных стран
in all neighboring countries is a top priority development aspect. Everyone confirmed that the developed infrastructure
одним из главных факторов
is a key factor for sustainable development of a region.
социальный прогресс
The social progress
между странами
and development of international cooperation
сейчас
is essential nowadays under current circumstances. I would like to say that the infrastructure development
оно касается
has been very progressive.
многих сфер.
It touched on many aspects and fields and industries and businesses. And the infrastructure, the common infrastructure
Будет своей частью. Это является очень важным.
with transportation infrastructure as a part of it is a great contribution to that.
Дальнейшее
Besides, I guess we need to focus on further computation
структур.
of the structures.
Транспортных структур
That's why creating a transportation infrastructure
и полной автоматизации и
and total computation and automation of processes
транспортной перевозки является
will be beneficial for any related party.
очень важным фактором. Это, конечно,
The third important factor is
сервис.
that the entire service should be convenient and comfortable.
Мы должны
Therefore,
всячески снижать
we aspire
несогласованность между нашими
for
те элементы, которые
effective communication and understanding. We need to prevent anything that can delay
передовых технологий
our
должны учитывать потребности.
progress and adoption of advanced technologies.
Соответственно, мы должны разные варианты транспорта.
We have to consider different options for transportation. We need to undertake a systemic approach to the transportation infrastructure and the total infrastructure. They should be developed systemically and in alignment. That's why China is ready to reach out to colleagues in different states.
进一步加强标准
полную согласованность наших
We have to work in alignment and in agreement,
важных
特别在疫情当下，
факторов.
我们
И
认为
именно
啊，
поэтому
because that's what the development depends on. And that's why this meeting makes sense, because enhancement of cooperation and communication
在疫情当下，
сотрудничество в области
进一步加
транспортных
强
in terms of transportation and shipping
будет способствовать
policies will positively affect
便利化
транспортных инфраструктур каждой
创新
страны.
和进步，
the individual states'
非常
transportation systems.
疫情结束后，
It will encourage future initiatives and projects.
Я очень рад
做更多的交流和互
российскими
动。
коллегами.
I'm extremely glad to see my Russian colleagues, and I really hope for a face-to-face meeting.
非常广泛深入
России
的
есть
交流合作，
большое количество
Russia
把这种
has got
научных организаций,
numerous research institutions that deal in transportation and businesses dealing in transportation. We keep in touch with them,
сотрудничества.
and we expect
Мы очень
a further
также на-
development of this cooperation. We really hope that it will go on like this in increasing speed. So thank you very much.
非常高兴来参加由中国共产党与俄罗斯
Я, к сожалению, заочно
I'm unfortunately gonna thank Mr. Liu for this very good speech, which are aimed to the very deep and wide cooperation on issues. I'd like to add a few words that,
например,
for example, the center where the whole number of international issues are centered. For example, our social Chinese transportation issues, which is our on the scale of the world is the biggest one, and the level of the representation is highest. So the paths that are represented, Ministry of Technology of China and Russia, and transportation science, and with the other science, I would like to say of the Russian system, and the Ministry of Transportation of Russia doesn't do that,
заместитель транспорта.
and the deputy of the Ministry of Transportation of China, and the biggest Chinese companies like Chinese Communication Construction, the infrastructural structure of the Alibaba, the biggest trading company of China, and the others. Can we adjust the sound, please? And
Я
I'd like to, maybe if someone did not use the translation, I'd like to additionally highlight in my own speech the above mentioned Liu's speech. And as a thank you, would like to thank the Secretary of the International Transportation Lines,
оказал так еще зарубежное
which caused a very big help
совещание
during the meeting,
в переводе.
and separately our translators. Probably today I heard one of the highly qualified translations today into Russian. Thank you.
И
And the next part
будет мой.
probably will be my speech. and I will add my own thoughts to the previous speaker. Can we switch on the Stanislav Marmelad's presentation, please?
Пока идет работа, я
While the work is going on, I'd like to start
с того, что
with
о чем говорил господин.
with what Mr. Liu was talking about, the work of the implementation,
Принципов устойчивого развития,
the principles of development, and the questions of the transportational infrastructure,
организационных, профессиональных,
which are required organizing professional skills,
исследований.
starting with cooperative research,
В случае необходимости
and in case of necessity of creating of common harmonized standards on the development of infrastructure, of its exploitation of different transportational, on the organizing of the management system and coordination, and some difficult issues of the international transportation. Thus, in such difficult times as today, which will be very modern, actual, and investment financing of the projects in the infrastructure development, and first of all of the transportation infrastructure, which is the biggest object of investment. I mean, on a worldwide scale, and the biggest account of the national riches, which are 10 times bigger and more expensive, bigger of the natural resources such as gold, etc., and which is make 40% of the whole national treasures of the natural resources. And when we're talking about the international transportation, where the communication is highly required of the all different types, automobile, railroad types of, and its transportation of goods, of the cargo, with the change of the carrier of the cargo, for example, from the railroad to the sea vehicles, or automobile to the railway, means. And for example, in a frame of so-called international transportation corridor west-east, Chinese, Kazakhstan, Russia, at least it requires 3 changes, and with its output to Belarus or Europe. And we can imagine how much coordination does it require, and safety measures, how much would it take, harmonization of the standards of the check-ins, partially on the questions, partially speaking of those questions and the organizing of those standardization will be said in the speech of the Georgy Anatolyevich Balyanov. Can we please now switch on the presentation? And if I'd like to have a translation of the slides with the voice, or what? Can I have a remote control, please, then?
Хорошо. Хорошо.
Okay, then now we're gonna deal with my presentation, and while it's going, I have a couple of words to say. I would like to ask for the presentation of Dr. Ulrich. And in means of investigation, of financial and investments in general, of such big projects and their projectional financing or transportational, and with our Eurasian partners, let's say, ways.
It's more and more important to take into account the ESG factors and create investment projects, trading projects, provide proper corporate management based on sustainable principles. We need to create new funding tools, investment attraction tools for projects in transportation, in big projects. We need to conform to the requirements related to risks associated with different approaches to standards. We need to take into account the sanctions and discrimination in terms of finances, trade, and economics. This is going to be covered by one of the best experts. That's Ulf Henning Richter, management doctor, professor of Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Can we display the slides?
Dr. Richter, are you with?
Dr. Richter.
Yes, hi.
Very glad to hear you. Just a second, we will get out your presentation and, oh, you could, yeah, we see you. Very glad to see you. So, your time.
Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure today to discuss the topic of green finance and look at it from the Chinese perspective. So presentation is on opportunities and pitfalls. Next, please. So when looking at the global landscape, we're all discussing climate change these days, and the truth is that the majority of the emission increase that has happened in the last 20 years comes from the meteoric rise of China. You can see here on the left-hand side, China made up 30% of the increase of the CO2 emissions globally. Next, please. Now, this can be explained very easily. China, of course, built a whole continent essentially, a lot of cities and a lot of infrastructure. It also increased its GDP growth rapidly, and that in itself also created a huge amount of new consumers. And what people do typically when they move into cities, they buy a car, they buy a TV. So as such, the consumption of commodities, of energy increased rapidly. You can see here on the left-hand side, the GDP growth, and the left-hand side, the energy consumption is a pretty clear, almost linear correlation, and also predicted to be continuing in the future. Here, in this case, the International Energy Agency predicts until 2040 well, it could be an increase to 20, 30, 40%, depending on what transition path China will choose. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, as of today, China's energy consumption is still largely comprised by coal, fossil fuels in general. One has to say that China is also the largest, has deployed the largest amount of renewable energies in its economy, but yet given the size and the magnitude of the phenomenon and the rapid increase in industrial production and energy consumption as a whole, until today, the majority is still coal, as we all are aware of. And so the target globally, if we want to understand how we can look at combating climate change, is really to a very large extent, what can we do with regards to the energy mix that is in use in the Chinese economy as of today. Thank you. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, this can be explained very easily, and we also have to understand if we are looking at the what is the target and what are we trying to achieve. Basically, the number one driver for the increase in CO2 emissions and the energy consumption is the urbanization across the world, in particular in emerging countries, China being the largest, but by far not the only. Of course, there's also large other countries and regions that are up and coming, including India and Africa. But given that the urban population globally is predicted to rise to at least 5 billion people, if not more, by 2050, we understand that we have to understand, we understand that we need to find a better way how to urbanize without increasing we have to break basically the linear relationship between urbanization, energy consumption, and emissions. So the Chinese economy is probably the best case to look at what, on the one hand side, the challenge is, globally speaking, but at the same time, what might be a solution in the future. Next, please. Now, looking at what is how construction and how urbanization actually takes place, we realize that most of it is residential in the Chinese case in particular, and residential residential buildings and construction. The use of energy for construction, in particular in China, is very high. The energy intensity of the Chinese economy is roughly 2 times of the US economy and roughly 2.5 to 3 times of the German economy. So why is this the case? In many ways, rapid construction and the deployment of building of large buildings is one of the causes, and we understand why this is the case. But obviously, this has to we have to address this in order to decrease the emissions and also the energy use of in construction in general. Next, please. So here is another view on this, another summary. And as you can see, China is the light green, the light green one. Chinese construction, highly energy intensive industries such as steel and cement is over 50% of the global economy. So, which of course can be explained looking at the large amount of infrastructure and infrastructure construction, but also residential. But well, that's okay. Next slide, please. That's so fine. So this is just an example of one single commodity, global steel production. And as of today, globally, China is consuming more than 50% of the global steel production. Well, is producing 50%, but also deploying 50% of more than 50% then global steel of the global steel industry. And this is a recent phenomenon. You can see it started pretty much at 2000. And when China embarked on a rapid growth and a infrastructure development path. Next, please. Now, China is, of course, also pledged for carbon neutrality in the case of China for 2060 in the Paris Agreement. So it set itself some targets, but given the size of the economy, the size of the phenomenon, these targets are still, still quite ambitious, so to speak, these to be able to achieve these. So looking at the development targets as of today, you can see from this particular graph that the current targets that have been set by the National Development and Reform Commission have to be adjusted if a pathway to carbon neutrality to 2060 would have to be achieved one. Next slide, please. Now, also in global terms, in terms of commission, in global terms, in terms of emissions, when looking at those countries that have pledged at for net zero, China, which is in the middle, you can see that the Chinese is the one in blue, the largest amount. It's responsible for about 30% of the emission reduction that have for the emissions at present, that and as such, the majority of the emissions that have to be removed or have to be offset in terms of with regards to the policy documents that have been issued by governments around the world. So China is by far the largest chunk of it, 3 times almost.
目前所发表的这些文件都
Очень ключевой момент.
是中国的其实因素还是比较大的。
Пожалуйста, можно переключить вперед?
Next slide, please. So these are some of the targets for 2030. They have become much more ambitious, and we do hope that China will become more ambitious even in the future. You can see on the right-hand side that, for instance, for the installed capacity of wind and solar, the target for 2020 was 534 gigawatt. This has been increased to 1,200, but likely has to be increased even further. Next slide, please. Now, the good news is, I'm sorry, I cannot see my own slides, but that's fine. I know them. So the good news is that China is by now leading the investments for renewable energies, and is also, given the targets that have been set by the Chinese government, is predicted to be leading also in the future. Now, in terms of what is happening at the moment, for instance, at the moment, one of the topics that has become very, very popular is, given also the theme of this conference, is net carbon, carbon neutral infrastructure construction, carbon neutral industrial parks, and in general, given the size of the construction sector in China, how to decarbonize the construction, not just in China, but across the world, so that China can accomplish and fulfill its promises that were made with regards to the pledges by the Paris agreements. Next, please. Now, given the size of what has to be accomplished, the Goldman Sachs in this case is estimating that in order to achieve carbon neutrality from the Chinese side, it will most likely have to invest $16 trillion until the end of, well, until 2050 in this case, but 2060, sorry. And the majority will be investments into renewable energies. Now, renewable energy, as of today, inside of China is, of course, a big opportunity. But the way I personally look at it is that this also represents a great opportunity for the countries, in particular in the Belt and Road, that are part of the Belt and Road Initiative, given that the way how emission can be traded and can be eventually can be accounted for in terms of the global footprint of the respective countries and the respective companies, it will be part of the footprint that China will be from its reporting back as its commitments and its achievements in terms of emission reduction. Next, please. Next slide, please. Right. So as we know, China started its own national ETS system, so emission trading system, last year. In the very beginning, it was very quiet. It's still in a testing phase, but one should understand that as of today, the majority of the companies, you can see a spike in December when suddenly trading became very, very active. December last year, 2021. The reason is relatively simple to explain, given that China's celebrating its Spring Festival in late January, early February. Most of the state-owned companies that are subject to the emission trading system that has been established by the Chinese government typically get active and try to find the offsets that they require in order to comply with the requirements by whichever regulator they're subject to inside of China. Now, how is this relevant? What we expect? So I personally, I am German, and in Germany and in Europe, we can see that the ideas of carbon credits and emission reduction has now has created a very large industry. I believe that eventually China will by far become the largest industry, given the size of the emissions that have to be offset, but also given the size of the industry in renewables that, well, both the industry production itself, but also the renewables that are the renewable industry inside of China that has become, of course, the world leader, both for deployed capacity inside of China, but also for construction of renewables in other parts of the world. Now, I personally believe this is a very great opportunity for several reasons. Number one, China will also internationalize its trading system eventually, once it has reached a certain maturity. As of today, as you can see from these trading patterns, it has not. Second, it will also use other jurisdictions, other locations to find ways to increase the amount of offsets. Right now, it is very much a national and domestic market, and also domestic industry. That will change in the future. I do believe, in particular, Russia will become a very big partner to China also in this area. And thirdly, I think that given that China is a very crucial, if not the most crucial partner in global supply chains, many companies need to offset their scope 3 emissions, so the emissions along the supply chain, and that would almost always lead them to China or a Chinese related activity. So for instance, the construction or production inside a Chinese factory. Next, please. Now, at the same time, Chinese companies also will have to face very big costs. And I, for instance, had a discussion with Novatek recently, and Novatek was very, very interested in also finding ways to offset or find projects, offset projects to enter global carbon markets, and they were specifically looking at China. On the other hand, I find a lot of Chinese companies are now looking for good places to invest into offset projects in order to bring to take advantage of the global carbon markets that are currently emerging. As of today, global carbon markets are roughly somewhere between $800 and $900 billion. The majority, over 90%, is Europe. But by 2025, 2030, the market is predicted to become at least $3 to $4, if not $5 to $6 trillion market, depending on how much governments will follow up on the pledges they did with regards to the 1.5-degree pathway from the Paris agreements. So that is a very large opportunity, both for Chinese entities, but also those who are going to work with the Chinese counterparties in order to either reduce or offset emissions. Last slide, please. So this is an example from Sweden. I put this up for one single reason. As you can see here, this is what we have to accomplish. The Swedish economy has completely detached its GDP growth from its both consumption-based CO2 emission increase, it decreased while increasing its GDP both in terms of consumption and production. This is the kind of effect we need to see in the future, also with regards to the Chinese economy, if we want to get anywhere close to accomplishing carbon neutrality. And I personally look at China as given that it's at the very heart of global supply chains for pretty much everyone, I see that as a global target, global task, I'm sorry. And I hope with collaboration with everyone, we are going to accomplish that, because otherwise we will face very serious consequences with regards to global temperature increases and the consequences of that. Thank you very much. And I wish you a good conference to all of you. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, доктор Рихтер.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richter. And I would like to highlight, meaning that you're working very closely.
Okay.
Как только вы
with the several green and carbon foundations, could you make estimation of your of the share of green finance or carbon-free finance in total volumes of investments for international contracts. Я спросил, учитывая опыт плотной работы господина Рихтера с...
Speaking about the close cooperation of Richter with Hong Kong institutions, can he estimate the share of such securities investments in the total scope
народные проекты? Okay.
of investments into international projects?
So, I can tell you a Hong Kong perspective. Hong Kong is now trying to reposition itself as a green finance hub, focusing on green bonds, green project finance, sustainable finance, but also blended finance, etc. I can't give you a concrete number, but I can tell you the other way around. The target numbers I gave you, so the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank and also Goldman Sachs, they estimate that per annum we need about $1 to $2 trillion dollars of investment in Asia alone for green, turning basically the whole, because Asia is so large, and I'm not just talking China, I'm talking all of Asia, in order to turn it into a more sustainable and carbon neutral, to create a carbon neutral infrastructure and construction as such. So that would include the water sector, that would include the transportation sector. So that's the target. So the current legislation that is being designed, and again, Hong Kong wants to be part of this, they want to have a good chunk of this, is trying to, what we're trying to do is to design tools, for instance, green bonds that would support this amount that is required to make this happen. I hope I can, I mean, these are targets, right? Okay. Of course, I personally, as you know, I mean, as a realist, I don't believe we accomplish these targets, but if we want to get anywhere close, these are the numbers that are out there.
Okay, thank you. Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much.
Переходим к следующему докладу.
Let's go to the next speaker.
Можно включить
Can you please
Станислав Мамулат?
display the presentation of Stanislav Mamulat?
Я продолжу тогда
Let me continue
ранее начатые моменты.
the idea that I started.
Скажем так, кратко хотел бы
I'd like to say briefly the meaning between the ESG development, constant international aspects, and with a transition to the cooperative and projectional level. It would like take into consideration. Currently,
многими во всяком принимают ESG.
Everyone can accept the ESG agenda, carbon emission part, and that's a kind of a like PR hype that is being spread by someone on the one side, but on the other hand, especially now, during the hardening of the international relations, and of course on the interregional, international level, it is necessary to provide constant development. That's what I'd like to say I highlighted for myself during the meeting in frame of the SCO with a representative of the sea and the president of Russia. They mentioned these words that determine the cooperation between these countries and organizations, like how to implement into that highly rapidly changing world those implementations. And with this, I would like to maybe it could sound like theorizing, but I'll try to understand what is it and the principles of ESG, how it was formed, how they formed their concept and their approach, and what is the base of it. Development, ESG, it's environmental, social, governing. Forming of this concept was vice versa, starting with the governance, with a cooperative approach of management, which started by Peter Drucker in the 50s, 60s. And the cooperative management is a management of social, public, or state corporations with those subjects, with taking into account the responsibility before the shareholders and in front of the publicity, citizens, politicians, and the other countries, and etc. So the social word was created then, or corporate responsible. And next block, in fact, since the 1980s till the 1990s, they're start to take ecological responsibility approach and cooperative or human responsibility in developing of the economical or commodity. So these are the main platforms and topics that must be taken into consideration, and you know, such things that were implemented in 1960s and 1970s, the aspects of the process of technology and goods on the whole life cycle, during the whole life cycle of the commodity, of taking natural resources, utilization, and in 2000 they started to add more and more aspects that take the influence on the climatic change. And in 2010s it almost come to the stop of using carbohydrate usage, and the main part is it was in 2010 it started to take the worldwide approach in that concept and the economy of or you can say it's circular in English transcription. And these aspects are worldly spread, and I'd like to mention a couple of moments that are especially related to the issues of the infrastructure development. First of all, during the creating the infrastructural objects, the possibility of using the ecological approach of management, the ESG approach, allows significantly optimize all the projects, not only in the socials, ecological responsibility, but also financial results. So in fact, all those events and principles are will allow to reduce some of the projects and the goods on the whole life cycle. So, and they will allow to increase the efficiency of the life cycle of this project, and at the same time reduces the values of investments. For the infrastructural projects, and in taking into account their scale, the investment scale, and the scale of the operations in the material in the commodities, it allows to implement secondary resources, wastes, industrial waste, metallurgy waste, energy. For example, during the road constructions, and it, you can say, does the infrastructure that is developing on the ESG, making the key part of that cycle. So the segment itself with the biggest influence on the environment, if it consumes secondary resources during the developing of its biggest events, it is what it is. So you can say, besides the macroeconomical and other things, we can say that during that researches show the implementation of their principles of constant development. So on this slide you can see the implementation, the ecology system on the companies and industries of their architectural and engineering that allows to reach in the frames of 2 or 3 years, and in long-term perspective, it's very competitive. It has very competitive advantages. So that sector is, according to the research, they are the main constructors on this field, and it takes a little bit less than 70% of the whole scale. And this is the.
There is an example in road construction. I'm providing the data from 2020 report made by the Lafrash Hassim, vice president of the company. He is a member of the One Belt, One Way International Transportation Alliance, and Hassim has a Russian office. This person is the co-chairperson of the Committee for Sustainable Development in Construction Materials Manufacturing Association. So he provides the data in terms of ESG principles adoption, starting of design of roads, supply chains, to the final point
30, то есть 40%
allows to reduce
бюджет.
from 30 to 40% of the budget.
Справа видны
On the right,
из,
you can see
короче, опять десятки процентов
the
сохранения,
percentage
сокращения
of emission reduction.
расхода. А в левой колонке видны
On the left,
бы
you can see
километр
the scale
четырехполосный, ну скажем, вот такой
of 1 kilometer of a 4-line
Это
highway, like Kazan-Ekaterinburg, saves 40,000 tons of materials.
десятки процентов экономий. Это
And this what leads to the cost reduction.
эффект. И самое интересное, что
Interestingly,
когда компания внедрила это,
that the company
развила
that adopted
в форме ОРИС
these principles
тему
on the ORIS base,
обеспечения
they introduced
распределению вторичных
analysis
ионом,
and management system that helped them rearrange the use of construction materials. They managed to assess if they can use these residual materials and if they can recycle or upcycle them.
о технологиях применения для
So
дорожного
it's also key to have a knowledge domain in terms of road construction.
функционирования такого
For 6 months
он,
of such a platform,
по словам Николая Мировалса, стал
this platform
дорогим активом
became the most expensive asset of the company,
цементных
even though the company owns 300 cement plants,
$100 миллионов.
and each of them is worth at least $200 million, but still this platform managed to become the most expensive asset.
Я не буду пока, скажем так, организационные и административные меры.
I'm not going to dive into administration and management events, but I'm given the floor
Очень,
to my colleague.
ну, необычайно, просто профессионально
I'm giving the floor to a superior expert
с точки зрения и
who will take the corporate perspective.
стандартизации
He is an expert in standardization and requirements,
Организации Объединенных
and his expertise is as high as the UN.
Тангу.
I'm giving the floor to Yu Kyang.
Are you with us? И который является который является
He is
разработчиком более
the author of 16 standards
устойчивого
in sustainable
вторичного
handling
для
of
организации
recycled
развития.
materials and sustainability of
И передаю.
industry, UNIDO. So I'm giving the floor.
Я listen to you. У нас все
请把
готово.
PPT 放到这个屏幕上好吗？
The speaker is speaking in Chinese.
Презентацию.
Show my presentation, please.
Да, это.
Уважаемые господа, уважаемые специалисты,
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear experts, hello.
я представляю,
I represent
меня зовут Юйтян, я сейчас
the organization. My name is Yu
выступить
Kyang. I'm
сначала
expecting that I can get down to business. I would like
компании.
to start with
Она была
the story about our company. It was established in 2005.
главное, что мы
The key thing
представляем, это
that we are dealing with
его
is
научно-технологическая обработка
the
вторичных ресурсов.
scientific handling of different residual systems and materials,
Охватываем основное это
recycling. We
самое главное
focus on reduction of carbon footprint
У нас уже 4000 километров построено.
We have built over 4,000 kilometers of road.
Главное
That's the key business that we do.
развитие. Мы производим большое количество шин.
We produce a lot of tires,
Здесь
and as you can see
наши
in my slides,
постоянно растут.
our
У нас
production turnover is increasing.
дело в нашей компании
We have different departments in our company. We have R&D,
отвечает за
responsible for
среды, уменьшение карбона,
environmental friendliness and reduction of carbon emission, for recycling and upcycling of tires.
принимаем участие каждое
We
количество.
annually take part in numerous international conferences.
Самое главное в чем
The key point here is that
участие с 2018 года
we started participating in environmental agenda in 2018.
стали активно контактировать с
We are increasing our contacts, enhancing our contacts
компаниями, чтобы
with different companies and regions, looking for
со всеми собственно
contacts, looking for communication links.
единственной компанией
We are the only
производит
company
шины и
that produces tires, but also constructs roads.
поэтому мы
Therefore,
обработки
we
переработки вторичных шин
recycle
и
tires in order to
качество
boost
покрытия
the workmanship, the craftsmanship of the road surface,
продукции
extend the life cycle of our product. In fact,
на каждый километр
every
снизить
kilometer of our road has the reduction cost and the emission cost by
следующее
reduce emission by 3-4%.
говоря наши основные принципы, которые
This is our corporate philosophy. Next one.
это 5G, одной основной
Our key principle is the 5G principle.
проектирование,
It's green design,
производство,
green production,
зеленое применение,
green application,
переработка вторичного
green recycling,
использования.
and green use again. So this is a loop cycle. Next one.
После у нас, конечно, в разных областях мы используем
Definitely we work in different
технологии,
industries and
применяем
we use different technologies that aim
эти
to reduce net cost of the road construction.
покрытия.
We aim to reduce
Также уменьшаем
costs
расходуемых
and emissions during road constructions. We reduce resources.
являются
We realize that recycled tires are not waste, it's actually a raw material.
что
And everyone knows
в Китае не хватает ресурсов,
that China lacks resources sometimes.
мы используем
But if we recycle certain materials, we can
то
meet up to 80% of our needs.
очень важно.
And that's key.
Сейчас хочу всем представить ту работу, которую мы
I would like to
2 года
present our recent project. We launched it 2 years ago.
новые технологии, которые мы
This project includes
используем,
the new technologies that we
так
are using.
уменьшает количество расходов.
It reduces
И все
the amount of materials applied.
в Китае строительство автодорог развивается,
You know that China is rapidly developing
и в результате
the road network.
каждый год
It results in the fact that
необходимо на это
annually
огромное
we
количество
revise our strategy and plans and improve our approach to asphalt craftsmanship.
И на данный момент все знают, что
So far, everyone knows
Производство асфальта
that asphalt production
это около 50 миллионов.
also is an increasing business.
И, собственно говоря, конечно, это большое загрязнение.
And when we produce asphalt from raw materials, it affects the environment because it produces a lot of emissions.
Тем стандартам,
But we aspire for conforming to the existing requirements. China now presents strict requirements to the environmental friendliness and production and to the craftsmanship of asphalt.
соответствующим образом справляется.
And we have to manage both of them.
Поэтому здесь вы можете посмотреть,
On the slide, you can see
что фактически
the
15% всех
reflection of this management. You can see that
на слайде
15%
расходов на это,
of all costs
в общем-то,
is reduced thanks to
влияние
reduction, and it's actually
на окружающих.
the cost that we spent on improvement of the asphalt quality. Around 17% of all complaints
Асфальтное покрытие следует
that are presented to
того запаха, который исходит от асфальта.
the quality of asphalt are provoked by the smell that this asphalt produces.
Запах, необходимость с ним справиться.
So this is the problem that we are currently dealing.
Соответственно,
We are reducing the amount of H2S in the content
имеющий, в общем, ядовитый.
because H2S has a specific smell and it's actually a poisonous gas, so that's why it's something to really work through.
Ну и соответствующие исследования
Our company
нам потом
carries out relevant researches, and the findings claim that we need to adopt reactions engaging phosphor
серый как раз
in order to neutralize the H2S.
и кроме того, фактически нам удается
In fact,
избавиться
these findings help us introduce technologies that
примерно показателя соответствующего
reduce the H2S smell down to zero.
таким образом это как раз отвечает за
So this is how we manage
много
to
и
reduce our contribution to the smog formation.
все эти компоненты таким образом приводят к тому,
The components that we use in
удается снизить
the technology that we use in our
на
products positively affect our aspiration for the reduction of emissions. Also, we
здесь вы можете
aspire for reducing negative effects
есть два аспекта,
against human health.
которые используют.
Our company applies two key approaches
Это
to settling these problems.
один из них довольно затратный, он требует большого.
One of the approaches is quite costly. It has a high
Тем не менее, все-таки
power consumption,
довольно эффективен.
even though it's a
Касается
little bit more effective than the other one.
использования этой технологии, то запахи при этом все-таки
This technology
убрать.
manages to reduce the smell of H2S down to zero. This technology
Нам удается убрать
also allows us to
следующий слайд, выхлопные газы, и таким образом
make the exhaust gases less
метода
poisonous.
эффективно удалять органические соединения.
And we managed to remove organic
Mr. Yu,
compounds from the emissions.
finalize quicker
Пожалуйста,
because
господин Ю,
потому-
завершить свою презентацию.
because we are out of time. Thank you.
好的，这样吧，我就总结一下吧。这个在碳减排
Подытожу кратко.
Okay, please let me finalize.
Ну, если кратко,
Briefly speaking,
методик и технологий, которые мы
using the methods and technologies developed our company, we managed
выбросы в окружающую
to cut the emission, the exhaust gases, and reduce the negative effects to human health. These methods, these technologies are very promising and progressive.
рады
Therefore, we are happy to be able to participate in this forum and share our experience.
что в нашем центре
I would like to say that
большое количество
our R&D has
того мы
a lot of experts and researchers. We are
взаимодействуем
active
в вопросах
in cooperation with our Russian colleagues.
того,
Besides,
собственно, получаем от них необходимую
we
поддержку.
get relevant support from them.
Надеемся, что
That's why we hope
будет больше возможностей.
that in the future we will have more opportunities to work with our Russian colleagues in the above-mentioned
У нас
aspects.
появляются новые технологии,
We keep
новые
getting new technologies, new developments,
и, соответственно, надеемся тому,
and that's why we hope that
в данном форуме все
during this forum,
вопросы
all the targets will be
всех поставлены,
discussed and reached in the future.
что в будущем
I hope that
еще часто с вами общаться.
in the future we will keep in touch.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much,
Мы
dear you.
по итогу
I hope that
нашего совещания
after the meeting
иначе обеспечим
we will
ее
publish all the materials
презентацией,
and presentations.
подготовленной вами очень интересно,
And we really appreciate your substantial
очень
report.
интересные, эффективные технологии будут
I hope that your technologies and methods
в любом случае
will be announced to public.
действительно работа
I see
на юге
the substantial work of Mr. Yu and your company
имеет
with Russian universities is a quite long-term
еще больше
one,
перспективы.
and I believe that it's very promising and has a long way to go in terms of creating R&D centers,
Инвестиционных,
maybe investment projects, foundations.
то мы очень рады
So we are happy to see you, and we are big friends with Mr. Yu,
продолжить.
and we will be happy to continue
Thank you.
with our mutual work.
Теперь слово
Now I'm giving the floor
Анатолию Балянову.
to Georgy Balyanov.
Прошу придерживаться.
So please stick to the timing.
Thank you very much. I'll try. Please, can you show up the presentation, please? Anyway, thank you very much to all the participants and organizers, and for giving me the opportunity to make my speech. Association since 2018 is representative for international ecology system representative, and we are very experienced in rating the negative aspects of different materials on the objects, environmental objects. And today I'd like to discuss the tools of the life cycle instrument and ecology declarations. First of all, we think that rate of the life cycle is the main part, and in the frames of making decisions, the main nuance is the basis of making decisions. These can be analytical methods, expert rates, the experience of the and the partners. But one of the biggest perspective approaches are scientific. So the life cycle rate allows us to move from assumption to the methods of making decisions. So the method that is based on the valuation of the life cycle valuation. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Ecological declaration that was developed on the valuation of the life cycle rate is giving the information to all stakeholders that correlates with the agenda on the transparency and open accessibility of the information. So what's the life cycle assessment? Is the standard of the procedure on research of influence of the product on different objects of the environment, on every stage of the life cycle of the product. Can we move to the back to the slide, please, to the previous slide? All right, thank you. So during the analysis, all the life cycle stages are taken into consideration, and on that basis, analysis is being made. The analysis of the information, any influence on any stage of the life cycle. So, if you want information to be comparable, we use the environmental declaration instrument, EPD. It allows us to interpret all the different values, so we keep the confidentiality of the data, and the document can be presented to any person that is interested in a project. So as far as that is standardized document, all the data this declaration can be used on any products. And you can see which of the products have the less minimum influence on the environment. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. In the frames of working with the international community and the Russian Federation, the less carbohydrates is we have a task to rate of the, and we can use the climate declaration for carbon that keeps all the information on the emission into the atmosphere on every stage of the life cycle. You can see the comparison of the on the slide. You can see the graphics, and all the values are the same, and you can find its own usage. You can see the usage of the ESG LCA of the different products of the constructional, infrastructural projects. This is very schematic. And you can rate the efficiency of the green investments on the different approaches and the negative influence on for the whole project. Currently, life cycle rate and declaration find its place in some Russian fields, such as system certification of buildings and the ecological declaration and the life cycle rate, and it has points, and that system is approved by the web, and you can take that into consideration for the investments. Thank you very much, Georgy Anatolyevich. Next speech is.
Can you please switch on the next report? Because we are behind the schedule and we need to listen to all of our international speakers.
Руслан, получится Нару? Да.
Can we do this?
Yes. Welcome, we are listening to you. Я надеюсь по-русски, извините, Нара.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizing committee of this event. I would like to wish success to all the participants in our further mutual cooperation. I would give a few examples on researches that we carried out in sustainable transportation, but my slides will be in English. So this is my first slide.
I believe that you have heard of the network called you have called of the Internet Infrastructure and Ecology Network of Europe. So will you do it simultaneous translation? Yeah. Yes. So I will just.
Yes, that's right.
We have translation.
Within this network, they have created a flexible coalition comprising 4 transport linear infrastructure conferences. And within this framework, they came up with international guidelines for ecologically friendly linear infrastructure. Why? Because we know that roads, railways, power lines, and other linear infrastructures are major threats to biodiversity globally. So therefore, finding a balance between faster growth on the one hand and protecting the environment on the other becomes a challenge as not to damage the natural environment irreversibly. So the global strategy aims then to support the mainstreaming of biodiversity and ecological connectivity into transport infrastructure. And it addresses in detail issues such as the need to launch proactive policy, establish appropriate legal frameworks, support better planning from the outset, promoting multi-sector cooperation, and encouraging innovative science-based solutions. So I'm sure all the participants, you are aware of the UN agency, especially for Europe, the UN Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE, and they lead the International Transport Infrastructure Observatory to enhance cooperation among the different transport infrastructure initiatives in Europe and Asia. And there is this publication called Transport for Sustainable Development, the case of inland transport. And this one in particular promotes in-depth understanding of 5 dimensions of sustainable transport. These are accessibility, affordability, safety, security, and environmental performance. Because transport is central, as we know, in shifting to sustainable low-carbon societies. But given the current situation and the energy crisis, etc., we really need a very high-level political will to decouple its growth from impacts like air pollution, traffic accidents, and climate change. Next slide. So within the framework of IIST, they have done studies called The Road to Sustainable Transport. And the data shows that transport accounts for about 64% of global oil consumption, 27% of all energy use, and 23% of the world's energy-related carbon dioxide emissions. And therefore, it is in the interest of all who work in the transport infrastructure sector to promote expansion of walkable cities, bike lanes, and increase electric micromobility. And preferably, government subsidies should go toward sustainable transport systems instead of fossil fuels. In the post-COVID era gives us also an opportunity to rethink and revamp the transit and reinforce really the positive impact on, by doing the structural change now in the transport sector, we could achieve positive impact on emission levels and air quality. And you also all know of the McKinsey company. And there is a study, an international study that's called Built to Last, Making Sustainability a Priority in Transport Infrastructure. And the sustainability in infrastructure has 4 dimensions, which can be approached from 5 angles. And the sustainability dimensions are, of course, environmental, social, institutional, and economic. And the angles to approach projects would be resilience, inclusiveness, technological advancement, productivity, and flexibility. And further, UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, they launched an initiative called Share the Road. And that also promotes walking and cycling infrastructure, including links to public transports. And the initiative has promoted non-motorized transport programs in many parts of the world. And there are many other initiatives that was started, but also it is being implemented with many other international stakeholders. These are some of them are, for instance, Global Fuel Economy Initiative that promotes introduction of cleaner, energy-efficient vehicles in developing and transitional countries. Obviously, the more developed countries have also fuel efficiency policies, but very few developing and emerging economies have formally adopted such standards. There is also the Global Clean Port Initiative. And this initiative in this project aims at reducing diesel PM and BC emissions from ports and maritime sources, such as emissions from ships, hovercraft, cargo handling equipment, trucks, trains, etc. And the Used Vehicles Program supports the development and implementation of minimum criterion standards in importing and exporting countries that they can use to curb the trade in the obsolete, aging, unsafe, and polluting cars. UNEP's Global Electric Mobility Program supports more than 50 low and middle-income countries with a shift from fossil fuels to electric vehicles. Next slide. This is about the transport strategies for net zero systems by design. And this is a strategy developed within the framework of OECD. So we are talking about the 3 dynamics at the source of car dependency and high emissions. And these are induced demand, urban sprawl, and the erosion of active and shared transport modes. And this OECD study and report provides policy recommendations to reverse those dynamics and reduce emissions while improving well-being. Also, it shows why the effectiveness in public acceptability of carbon pricing and policies incentivizing vehicle electrification will significantly increase after policy reprioritization towards systems redesign. So these are only some of the examples. These are some of the examples. There is no more. So, you of course, I haven't talked here about the Belt and Road Initiative and Brita, because I believe there will be other presenters who will go more in detail into that. And I'm aware within BRI and Brita, there is a system that focuses on green financing and green standards for the transport and infrastructure sector. I also work for a global alliance called Global Alliance for Sustainable Planet. Within the alliance, we are aiming to build partnerships, global and especially at country level, partnerships at high level, garner political support, and work together to mobilize private finance for public good. And outside of the conference, I would be ready also for further discussion with the participants of the conference and organizer. So I will finish my presentation now, and would like to thank you again for this organizing this important conference. And above all, hope that we will continue cooperating in the future.
Thank you very much, Nara. Thank you.
Организаторы нас уже просят.
The organizers are asking us to finish. Dasha, can we do this without publication? Can we just stand up and leave?